everyone, it's Nina. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today I'm here with Simon Says Stamp and I'm going to be walking you through how to create this masked and stamped scene using products from Newton's Nook Designs. Here I've got the new Hello Spring stamp set. I just love this stamp set, and this features the cute little lily bunny and also a bunch of little chicks, which we're going to be using on today's card. So I'm using my mini Misty here, and I'm going to be starting by stamping my little chicks onto my cardstock here. This is just some scrap cardstock. I'm going to be stamping these on with some Simon Says Stamp Intense Black dye ink. I've created a little mask for this chick, which I've applied on top, and I'm going to then stack the same chick that I stamped the first time. I'm going to stamp another one on top of him. This is going to be a stack of 3 little chicks. I'll pick that back up with my Misty and then ink it back up with my Intense Black dye ink. I'm using Copic markers for my coloring, so I love this ink for my Copic coloring because it doesn't bleed with the markers. I'll reapply that mask, and then I'm going to stamp this adorable little chick still stuck in the egg. This just cracks me up. I love how cute this is. This is such a fun little image. So I'm going to stamp him on top. He's going to be teetering on the very top of this little stack of chicks. And I'm going to ink this one up as well. And having that mask allows me to be able to create this little stacked scene. So now I'm going to start my Copic coloring. I'm going to have all the colors that I'm using listed on the side of the screen. A question I get often from people are whether or not you can color with your Copics doing the darkest color first and then gradually working towards your lightest color. And the answer is that you indeed can. You would just work in the opposite order of what a lot of people end up doing, is working with their lightest colors and then gradually working to the darkest and then blending everything back out. This actually requires a little less blending because you're blending as you go along. Most of the time I color with the lightest colors first and then gradually work to my darkest, but I wanted to be able to show you this is that you can indeed color using your darkest colors first and working towards your lightest. So whichever works easiest for you, go ahead and try that. So I'm going to finish coloring and then I will come back in a few minutes after we have finished the coloring process, and then we will get started on creating the card. Alright, so now I'm back and I've got a mask here. You can see I've already used this before. This was just die cut from a My Favorite Things Grassy Hills die. I'm going to go ahead and apply this down onto my paper. This is my card base that I have attached underneath with painter's tape onto my work desk. I'm going to start by ink blending these 2 Distress Ink colors on top. I'm using the mask to create my grass, and I'm going to be also using this Hero Arts Shadow Ink, which is Forever Green, to be my darkest color, and I'm going to use that just very lightly. So to begin with, I'm going to start adding in my Twisted Citron, and I'm just going to blend this in, get a nice coating of light green down, and then I will go ahead and start blending in some darker colors. This is going to give my grass some shading and dimension, and give it a little bit more of a realistic and intense feel. If you do just one color, it's going to be a little bit more flat, and you can indeed do this, but I do love the contrast that it gives to have the extra color and darker shadows. So definitely practice working in your darker colors because that will really intensify your scene and give it a lot more depth and realisticness. So here I'm blending in a little bit of more mowed lawn. I moved the stencil up, and this time I'm creating a second layer of grass, and I've added the other portion of the mask, which was the part that got cut off. I'm going to use that as covering up the grass that we had originally inked. So it's letting me be able to mask off the bottom layer and add some depth behind it. So I'm going to now bring in some of that Forever Green, and I'm going to do this along the very edges of this grass. I'm going very sparingly with this. I'm adding it along the tips of that bottom mask. So I'll go ahead and lift that off. And there you can see we've got our grass. I'm going to reapply that other mask, and I'm going to use that to hide my grass so that way I can stamp these tulips. And I'm also going to be stamping another flower from another Newton's Nook stamp set. All of the products that I'm using are listed over at the Simon Says Stamp blog, so be sure to check that out. I'm using the mask because I want to be able to make the flowers look like they are in the grass rather than stamped on top. So this is going to allow me to be able to achieve that look. Alright, so now I'm going to reapply that mask once again, and this time I'm applying it to the bottom layer of grass, and I'm going to be flicking on some color. And this is allowing me to keep the color of the markers off of the bottom portion of grass. So now I'll just remove that bottom portion and add those flicks of color onto that portion of the grass as well. So as you can see, we're creating a lot of depth and texture to our grass, and you can go ahead and skip this step if you don't want to add the extra texture, but I do love how it looks. So now I'm going to color in the flowers, and I'm going to go ahead and play some music while I color because it's pretty simple coloring, and then I'll come back when we start the next step of the process. Alright, so now I'm going to be stamping some clouds. These are from the Newton Dreams of Paris stamp set. This is a really cute stamp set, but I loved the little clouds that were included in it. So I'm going to be using these to create a little bit of a sky in my background. So I'll just stamp these down. I'm using the same Simon Says Stamp Intense Black Dye ink. I'm going to go ahead and color those now with my Copic markers. I'm just doing some simple shading on these clouds. I'm just adding a few colors of blue, coloring it solidly first with a light blue color, and then I will add in some texture shading using a slightly darker marker. To finish off my sky, I'm going to take some squeezed lemonade distress ink and do a very light little bit of shading along the edges of the grass and also on the sides of this card panel. This is just going to create the suggestion of sky and really finish off this card and add a nice pop of color. So I'll just remove the masks, and what this mask did is this created a nice white border along the edge of my card. I really like how the crisp lines of the white cardstock that we covered up with the masks really create a nice frame for our scene. It really intensifies the color and makes this whole card pop. Alright, so now I need to add my sentiment. I've lined up where my chicks are going to be standing up. I cut those out with some fine tip scissors. And I'll go ahead and stamp my sentiment onto my card. I'm using my Mini Misty to do this. I'm going to be stamping this in the Simon Says Stamp Intense Black Dye ink. I love this ink for all my stamping. I use it for watercoloring, stamping sentiments, stamping for Copics. I use this all the time. This is definitely a perfect ink for all of your stamping needs. So once I stamp that down, I'm going to go ahead and move on to adding my chicks to the card. This is mostly a one-layer card except for these little chicks. I don't know what my problem is. I keep dropping them here. I must be like too overwhelmed by the cuteness. So I'll go ahead and put those down, and then I will go ahead and add a little bit of sparkle and shine using some Wink of Stella glitter. I can't get enough of this glitter pen, and I use it on all my projects. So I'll apply some of that down. Then I'm going to take a white gel pen and add some dot texture and a little bit of detail to some of my images on this card. I really love adding a white gel pen detail to my images because it adds a nice little bit of detail and interest to your coloring. So to finish things up, I added a little bit of glossy accents on some of the images, including the egg and the centers of the flowers. And that's going to do it. I hope you've enjoyed and got some inspiration on creating with masks. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments section below. And head on over to the Simon Says Stamp blog where you can get more information on this card, including still pictures and products used. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.